I attended my cousin's engagement. What the groom did behind her back shocked me. I was only supposed to be a guest, a distant cousin showing up to celebrate love and toast champagne, but what I saw that night changed everything. While everyone was focused on the glittering lights and smiling selfies, I caught the groom slipping out of the banquet hall with someone who was definitely not my cousin. I followed, thinking I must be mistaken. But what I witnessed made my blood run cold. I wasn't just a bystander anymore. I had a choice to make: stay quiet and protect the fairy tale, or speak up and shatter everything. I never imagined what would come next. Before we dive into this story of betrayal and tough choices, tell us, what country are you watching from? Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more gripping real life drama stories just like this one. I hadn't seen my cousin Alina in over a year. We used to be close. Sleepovers, shared secrets, and hours. Long phone calls about everything from crushes to college stress. But life had a way of pulling people apart. She got a job in another city, started dating this perfect guy named Fahad, and before I knew it, the engagement invitations were out and I was just another relative in the crowd. Still, I wanted to be there for her big day. I arrived at the venue, an elegant, candlelit hall dressed in white roses and shimmering gold accents, half expecting to feel like an outsider. Instead, the moment Alina saw me, she ran over in her heavy embroidered dress, eyes sparkling. "You came," she exclaimed, wrapping me in a tight hug. "Of course," I said, smiling. "I wouldn't miss this." Everyone was buzzing with excitement. The photographers danced around the hall, snapping pictures of the glowing couple. Aunties clutched their clutches tightly, gossiping under their breath, while teenage cousins hovered near the dessert table. I stood near the edge, watching it all. Alina looked breathtaking, her makeup soft, her hair pinned in elegant waves. She looked happy, but as I scanned the room, my eyes landed on Fahad. He was charming in a pressed sherwani, greeting guests with practiced ease. Yet something about him felt off. His smile was too polished. His attention was never fully on Alina. He laughed at the right jokes and said all the right things, but I couldn't shake the sense that he was performing. About an hour into the ceremony, speeches started. Everyone clapped and laughed at the stories about how Alina and Fahad met, how perfect they were, how this engagement was the beginning of a lifetime of happiness. Alina beamed as her father teared up mid-speech. Fahad stood beside her, arm loosely around her waist, nodding like a man fulfilling a duty. My unease deepened. I told myself I was just being overprotective. Alina had made her choice. Maybe I was reading too much into his detachment. But my gut wouldn't let it go. I watched closely as the evening unfolded. Every time Alina turned to greet a guest, Fahad seemed distracted, his eyes scanning the room for someone or something else. And then it happened. I had gone outside for air, too much perfume and emotion packed into one space, and I noticed Fahad near the side exit, talking to a woman I didn't recognize. She was tall, dressed in a deep maroon outfit that looked too informal for the engagement, but too bold to be coincidental. At first, I thought they were just acquaintances, but then I saw him lean in closer. His hand brushed her arm in a way that made me freeze. She laughed, leaning into him, and he reached into his coat pocket to hand her something. I stepped back behind a potted plant, my heart hammering. They looked too familiar, too comfortable. I waited, torn between confronting him right there and staying hidden. Eventually, they walked further toward the parking area. I followed at a distance, staying in the shadows. I heard her giggle and say, "You're really going through with it." His response chilled me. "Of course," he said, "it's just for the image. You know how her family is, conservative, traditional. This keeps them happy, and keeps the business deal alive." Business deal. My stomach turned, the woman asked, and after that, Fahad smirked. "You and I know the real story. Once it's all settled, we'll do our own thing, just wait." I stepped back, stunned. This wasn't a harmless flirtation. This was calculated betrayal. My cousin was standing inside, probably showing off her engagement ring to some second cousin, while the man she was about to marry was planning an entirely separate life with someone else. I walked back into the hall, my hands shaking. The music was louder now, and Alina was surrounded by people. I couldn't go straight to her. This wasn't the time or place, but I had to do something. I couldn't just pretend I hadn't seen what I'd seen. I pulled aside my older brother, the only person I trusted fully in moments like these. "I need to talk to you," I whispered. Outside, I explained everything. What I saw, what I heard, how I wasn't even sure what to do. He looked at me carefully and said, "You can't stay silent, but don't rush into it. If you speak up without proof, they'll say you're jealous or attention seeking. You know how family can be." He was right. I needed evidence. I remembered the woman's face, her outfit, the way she laughed. It wasn't much, but maybe I could find her social media or figure out how she knew Fahad. I spent the rest of the evening quietly observing, memorizing everything I could. When the party started winding down, I saw Fahad sneak away again. This time alone, I followed him. He stood in the hallway, texting. I quietly took a photo from behind, capturing him and the screen, where the name Sana was clearly visible above a message. "Tonight was risky but thrilling. Love you. Can't wait until it's just us." It was the confirmation I needed. The atmosphere that morning was a strange mix of nervous energy and orchestrated excitement. Alina, my cousin, was glowing, or at least doing her best to appear as though nothing was wrong. The engagement ceremony was set to take place in the grand hall of a 5-star hotel downtown, and everything from the imported orchids to the glittering lights screamed opulence. Yet beneath the sparkle, there was tension. I knew why. Fahad, ever since I had seen him at the cafe 2 days before the engagement, whispering sweet nothings to a woman who clearly wasn't Alina, I had been carrying the weight of the truth like a stone in my chest. I hadn't told her yet. I kept asking myself if I was overreacting, if there was some reasonable explanation, or if revealing the truth would ruin her big day unnecessarily. But something in my gut told me that what I saw was only the tip of something rotten. I tried to keep myself busy, helping with the last-minute arrangements, greeting guests, and making sure Alina had everything she needed. But each time Fahad's face appeared, laughing with her uncles, posing for photos, acting like the golden boy, I felt my fists clench. I caught him smirking more than once when Alina wasn't looking, and worse, I saw him checking his phone constantly, stepping away to take calls. The final straw came when I walked past a secluded side hallway and heard him murmuring into the phone, "Yeah, I'll leave right after the ring ceremony. She won't even notice." His voice dripped with arrogance, as if this engagement was just a social task to be checked off before moving on to his real plans. I walked away, heart pounding, and immediately texted the cafe's manager to confirm if the woman Fahad was with 2 days ago was someone he had been seen with before. The reply came in seconds. "They come here every week. I thought they were married." That was it. I couldn't let Alina walk into a marriage based on lies. I had a choice: stay silent and protect the event, or speak up and protect Alina. I chose her. Right before the ceremony, I found Alina sitting in the bridal suite, adjusting her earrings. She looked so serene, so in love, so tragically unaware. My voice cracked when I said her name. She turned to me, concern flashing across her face. "What's wrong?" she asked. I sat down next to her and took a deep breath. "Alina, I saw Fahad with someone else twice, once at the cafe and just now on the phone. He's planning something, and it doesn't include you." Her face paled instantly. "What are you saying?" she whispered. I showed her the texts, the photos I had taken at the cafe, even played her a recording of his call from the hallway. I watched her heart shatter in real time. There was a long pause, then something shifted in her eyes, not just pain but fire. She wiped her tears, stood up slowly, and looked at herself in the mirror. "He thinks I'm weak," she said, her voice cold and clear. "Let's give him a show. We didn't cancel the ceremony. Instead, Alina walked out with confidence, performed every ritual, posed for every photo, and smiled for every guest. But just before the ring exchange, she held up a hand. "Before we continue," she said into the microphone, "I have something to share." She invited me to join her and handed me her phone. "Please show everyone what you showed me." The room went quiet. I played the recording, then showed the photos. Murmurs turned into gasps. Fahad stood frozen, his face draining of color. His parents rushed forward, trying to intervene, but Alina remained poised. "You may have lied to me, Fahad," she said loud enough for the room to hear, "but today I choose truth. I choose myself." The engagement was called off. Guests started leaving, whispering in disbelief, but Alina stood tall, and in that moment, I knew she had taken back her power, not just from Fahad, but from every moment in her life where she'd been made to feel small. After the engagement was called off in front of nearly 100 guests, the hotel ballroom fell into an eerie silence, interrupted only by the shuffle of confused and embarrassed attendees leaving through the double doors. What had started as a celebration had unraveled into a scandalous storm, with whispers trailing behind every departing couple. But Alina, she stood there on that stage, still in her embroidered lavender lehenga, her chin high, her spine straight. If heartbreak was devouring her from the inside, she didn't let a single crack show on the surface. Fahad, on the other hand, was a mess. His face, flushed and trembling, showed the full weight of public exposure. His eyes darted around, looking for support, but found none. His own parents stood a few feet away in stiff silence, their mouths pursed, humiliated beyond repair. No one reached out to console him. No one dared. The video I had played, the one of him arranging to leave Alina just after the ring ceremony, was damning enough. But the photo evidence, especially the shot of him holding hands with the other woman just 2 days before, had solidified his fate. Alina walked off the stage and came straight to me. We didn't say much. Our silence was full, heavy, but understood. She clutched my arm tightly, and we made our way to the bridal suite together. As soon as we were alone, the composure she'd held with such strength collapsed into sobs. I held her as she cried, letting her grief break free. "I can't believe I almost tied my life to someone like him," she whispered. "I thought I knew him. You only knew what he let you see," I said softly. "But you saw the truth in time. That's more than most people ever get." I meant it. Many go years into toxic marriages before recognizing the lies. Alina had seen the red flags and chosen herself over societal pressure, and that, to me, was the real victory. After about an hour, Alina dried her tears, washed her face, and asked everyone to leave her alone for a while. I stepped out, only to be immediately approached by Uncle Jamil, Alina's father. He looked pale, his voice low. "Is it true?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. I nodded. "And you knew this before the ceremony?" "I saw him at a cafe with the same woman twice," I admitted. I didn't want to say anything unless I was sure. He closed his eyes, the weight of it all pressing down on his shoulders. "I thought we were giving her a stable life, a good family name. I didn't see the cracks, and none of us did." I said gently. He was careful, too careful, but Alina was braver. Just then, Fahad barged into the hallway, his jaw tight, his voice loud. "You set me up. You ruined everything," he shouted, pointing at me. His parents followed, trying to calm him down, but the damage was done. "I didn't ruin anything," I replied calmly. "You did. I just told the truth." Alina stepped out from the suite, her voice cutting through the tension. "You humiliated yourself, Fahad. You played with my trust like it meant nothing. And if anyone's to blame, it's you." His mouth opened, ready for another retort, but my uncle raised a hand. "That's enough. Leave now, before I have hotel security escort you out." Fahad's pride wouldn't let him make a scene. He turned and stormed off, leaving behind a cloud of disgrace and unanswered questions. That evening, Alina refused to go home with her parents. "I don't want the pity. I need to breathe," she said. So she stayed at my apartment. We ordered takeout, watched an old rom, calm, and tried to laugh through the aching silence that still lingered between us. At one point she looked at me and said, "You saved me," but I shook my head. "You saved yourself. I just handed you the flashlight." The next few days were hard. News of the engagement fiasco spread like wildfire through our extended family and social circles. Some blamed Alina for making it public. Others blamed me for interfering. But the people who truly mattered, Alina's siblings, her close friends, and eventually even her parents, stood by her side. They saw her not as a broken bride, but as a woman who refused to be betrayed quietly. Alina's resilience surprised even herself. Rather than wallow in what-ifs, she started journaling. She began therapy. She reached out to her workplace and resumed her job within a week. "He doesn't get to freeze my life," she said to me one night. "I may have lost an engagement, but I gained clarity, and honestly, that's more valuable." What no one expected, however, was the twist that came 10 days later. Alina received a message on Instagram from a stranger. The woman introduced herself as Zoya. Her profile had no pictures, but the message was long. She claimed to be the same woman Fahad had been seeing secretly. She hadn't known he was engaged until our video went viral. "I had no idea," she wrote. "He told me he was single. He said his parents were pushing him to meet someone else, but that he wasn't serious about it." Alina forwarded the message to me, her hands shaking. "Do you think she's lying?" she asked. I shook my head. "I think she's the last domino." We messaged back and forth with Zoya for hours. Eventually, she agreed to a video call. When we saw her face, real, genuine, tear-streaked, it confirmed everything. She had been in a relationship with Fahad for nearly 8 months. She was under the impression that they were exclusive, that their parents would soon meet, and that marriage was on the horizon. Her heartbreak mirrored Alina's, but instead of anger, what formed between the two women was an unexpected alliance. They exposed him together. Zoya uploaded screenshots of her chats with Fahad, voice notes, and pictures of them vacationing. Everything with date, sent to her social media. Alina simply shared the post with the caption, "He played us both, but we rise together." That post went viral too. Suddenly, Alina was no longer a woman scorned. She was a symbol of strength, dignity, and grace under fire. People reached out to her from everywhere. Women who had been betrayed, men who regretted their silence, and countless strangers who just wanted to say, "Thank you for standing up." The days following the viral exposure of Fahad's double life turned Alina into an accidental symbol of dignity and heartbreak. Her graceful composure, both at the engagement ceremony and afterward, stirred something in everyone who followed the story. While gossip buzzed in social circles and family WhatsApp groups, Alina didn't retreat. She rose. She didn't issue angry rants or demand pity. Instead, she held her head high, allowing truth to be its own defense. And in doing so, she ignited a ripple far beyond our family. The media picked up the story. Small local outlets at first, curious about the engagement that wasn't. A journalist reached out for an interview, intrigued by the way Alina and Zoya, two women with no reason to be kind to one another, chose solidarity over blame. Alina hesitated, unsure about putting her personal life on display any further. But Zoya encouraged her. "Let's control the story before someone else does," she said. Together, they shared their experience, not to destroy Fahad, but to highlight the red flags many women overlook. The article went viral. It was raw, honest, and heartbreakingly human. They spoke of love, betrayal, and, most powerfully, reclaiming one's worth, and Fahad, he vanished. His social media accounts were deleted, his phone numbers changed, and his family issued a bland public statement about deep regrets and private matters. But the damage had been done. His company quietly demoted him from a client-facing role, and mutual friends distanced themselves. Not because of the scandal, but because of his arrogance when it all unraveled. The man who once strutted through life like a peacock now lurked in the shadows of shame. But this chapter wasn't about Fahad anymore. It was about Alina, and how she turned betrayal into empowerment, I remember one morning, about 2 weeks after the engagement, Alina called me. Her voice sounded different, lighter. "Do you have time to meet for breakfast?" she asked. I rushed to the cafe where we usually met, expecting a heart-to-heart about lingering pain. Instead, she pulled out a laptop and said, "I have an idea." She wanted to start a platform, an online support space for women going through breakups, toxic relationships, or difficult engagements. Not a typical vent and forget forum, but something real, with therapists, legal advisors, success stories, and safe virtual circles. If I had something like this when I first saw the signs, she said, maybe I would have left sooner, maybe others can. It was bold, ambitious, and so perfectly her. Over the next few weeks, we worked together on the platform's development. Zoya joined too, handling content and outreach. We named it Still Worthy. Within a month of its launch, it had over 5,000 active users. Survivors of deceit and betrayal poured in with stories of their own. Some found closure. Others found the strength to walk away. Alina became a quiet inspiration, not because she sought to be, but because she chose healing over hiding. At our cousin's wedding a month later, yes, another cousin's, we both attended, this time as guests with no scandals hanging over our heads. When Alina entered the hall, she turned heads, not because of the pain she had endured, but because of the confidence she now wore like a crown. She hugged relatives who had whispered behind her back weeks ago, smiled at those who once questioned her worth, and stood unshaken through it all. One auntie even muttered, "She looks stronger than ever." Later that night, I asked her, "Do you regret anything?" She thought for a moment. "I regret not seeing the signs earlier, but I don't regret walking away. If I had said nothing, if I had let fear of scandal control me, I'd be married to a man who couldn't respect me." She paused, sipping her drink. "And now, I'm building something that helps others feel seen. That's more than closure. That's purpose." What made this climax so profound wasn't just the exposure of the lie, but the transformation that followed. Alina didn't just survive, she rebuilt. She turned her broken engagement into a foundation for thousands of other women to find their voice. Her platform became a lifeline, with women from all over the country reaching out, saying, "Thank you, you helped me leave," or "Your story gave me courage." One story stuck with us. A girl from a rural village, engaged at 17, read Alina's story through a translated post. She gathered screenshots of her fiancé's lies and took them to her family. At first, they didn't believe her. But eventually they listened. The engagement was cancelled. She later sent Alina a voice note, "Your pain saved my life." That one message brought Alina to tears. What began as a betrayal became a revolution of quiet strength. A reminder that dignity, when paired with truth, is louder than any lie. And for me, as her cousin who had once hesitated to say anything, it reminded me why we must always speak up. Because the cost of silence is often someone else's future. The days after the engagement party felt strangely heavy. Although I hadn't said anything publicly about what I had witnessed, the groom sneaking off with another woman and whispering something that clearly wasn't meant for his fiancée's ears, I couldn't shake the image from my mind. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him leaning in, his hand on the waist of someone who definitely wasn't my cousin Rita. And every time I opened my eyes, I saw Rita smiling, posting happy selfies, still lost in the dream of a wedding that had already begun to sour in the shadows. I debated whether to tell her. After all, it wasn't just a fleeting moment of doubt. It was something real, something damaging, but I was afraid too. Afraid that she would think I was jealous, or that I was trying to ruin her happiness. We weren't always close growing up, and people often assume the worst when you deliver bad news, especially when it concerns someone they love. I kept replaying that moment in my head, the way the groom, Bill, glanced around nervously before slipping away with the woman in the burgundy dress, the way he smirked, thinking no one saw, but someone did. I did. Rita's mother, my aunt, called me a few days later. She wanted to discuss some minor wedding preparations and casually mentioned how happy and in love Rita was. Her words were so full of joy that they twisted like a knife inside me. Was I supposed to let her walk into this marriage blind? My conscience wouldn't let me, so I made a decision, not to break the news outright, but to investigate further. If I had real proof, then I could act without being accused of jealousy or sabotage. I began with the photos. My brother had taken hundreds at the engagement party. I browsed through them one evening while visiting him, pretending I just wanted to relive the celebration. Eventually, I spotted a few frames that confirmed what I'd seen. Bilal was indeed whispering into the ear of the mystery woman, standing way too close for comfort. The woman's back was mostly turned, but there was something familiar about her posture. I zoomed in and noticed the small crescent tattoo on her shoulder, barely visible beneath her dress. That detail sparked something in my memory. I remembered a mutual acquaintance from college who had a similar tattoo. Her name was Sabine. She had once dated Bilal before things ended on a messy note. At least, that's what I had been told. But what if it had never really ended? The possibility made my skin crawl. Now that I had a name, I searched social media. Within minutes, I found Sabine's profile. It was public, and I scrolled cautiously through her latest uploads. And there it was, a post from the night of the engagement. A dimly lit photo from the same venue, taken at a flattering angle. No tags, no captions. Just a champagne glass and what looked like a man's hand in the background. The watch on the wrist was unmistakable. Bilal's. My heart pounded. I saved the photo and screenshots of the comments. It was subtle, yes, but it was enough for anyone paying attention. The next step was harder. I needed someone neutral to confirm the connection. That's when I reached out to an old friend, Zara, who had attended the same university as Bilal and Sabine. I asked casually if they had stayed in touch over the years. Zara responded quickly, "Oh yeah, on and off. Everyone knew they had this weird unresolved thing. Surprised he's getting married, tbh. That was it." The final nail. Now armed with pictures, names, and context, I prepared to talk to Rita. But I also knew I couldn't go in guns blazing. I couldn't just drop this information in her lap and hope she'd believe me. I needed her to see it herself, to come to her own conclusion. I invited her out for coffee, away from the chaos of wedding prep, and gently eased the conversation toward Bilal. I asked how they met, how sure she was about the future. She giggled nervously and said, "He's not perfect, but he's mine." I felt a chill. After a long pause, I said, "I want to show you something, but only if you promise not to freak out immediately. Just look, and then we'll talk." Her smile faltered. "You're scaring me." I handed over my phone. I had arranged the photos and screenshots in order, starting from the engagement night to the social media clues. As she scrolled, her face went pale. Her fingers trembled. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then, finally, she looked up, tears brimming in her eyes. "Why would he do this to me?" she whispered. I reached out and held her hand across the table. "Because some people think they can have it all, and maybe he thought you'd never find out." She wiped her eyes, nodded, and stared at the table for what felt like hours. Then she asked me something I didn't expect. "Will you help me figure out what to do?" I nodded without hesitation. The next few days were quiet. Rita pulled back from Bilal without confrontation. She told her family she needed space to think. In the background, she kept observing him, watching his patterns, noting inconsistencies. I helped her discreetly hire a private investigator to follow up on his recent activities. What came back was shocking. Bilal had met with Sabine twice in the week after the engagement party, and both meetings had ended at her apartment. The PI also handed over surveillance photos, crystal clear. When Rita saw the final photos, her face hardened. No more tears. Just determination. She said, "I know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to wait until the perfect moment." That moment came 2 weeks later at the bridal shower, a big affair at a high-end venue with dozens of guests and plenty of cameras. Rita had put on a brave face and smiled through the event. Bilal arrived late, blamed traffic, and proceeded to schmooze like nothing was wrong. But Rita had something planned. Just before the event ended, she tapped her glass with a fork and called for everyone's attention. "I'd like to say a few words," she began, and the room quieted. I stood to the side, knowing what was coming but still holding my breath. Rita spoke clearly, her voice unwavering. "They say love is about trust, about honesty, and when we lose those things, what are we left with? I was excited to get married to a man I thought loved me, but love doesn't lie, it doesn't cheat, and it certainly doesn't sneak around with someone else behind your back." The room fell into stunned silence. Rita held up the photographs for everyone to see. The crowd gasped. Bilal froze. "Some of you may recognize the woman," Rita continued, "and some of you may not. But this was taken 2 nights after our engagement." Murmurs erupted across the room. Bilal turned beet red and tried to step forward, but Rita held up her hand. "Save it, we're done." Then she calmly placed the microphone back, turned around and walked away, heels clicking, spine straight. Every head turned with her, and in that moment I had never felt prouder to call her my cousin. After the bomb Rita dropped at her bridal shower, the fallout was swift and public. The room had descended into stunned silence, broken only by the soft clinking of glasses and whispered gasps as she revealed the truth. Guests didn't know where to look. Some stared awkwardly at Bilal, others at Sabine, who had the audacity to show up that day, sitting smugly at the back like nothing had happened. But the moment Rita lifted those photos and exposed them both, Sabine's expression turned to stone. She stood abruptly, clutching her purse like it could shield her from the shame, and practically bolted from the venue. Bilal, on the other hand, tried to follow Rita out, but the crowd became a wall. No one moved to help him. No one tried to intervene. In the days that followed, word spread like wildfire. Screenshots of the confrontation, snippets of the speech, and even grainy photos of Bilal's shocked face circulated online. The engagement, of course, was called off, and Rita made it clear she wouldn't be taking questions. She refused to let anyone turn her heartbreak into gossip fodder. But people talked anyway, about her strength, about Bilal's foolishness, and about how nobody expected the shy, sweet girl to take such a commanding stand. I stayed close to her through that week. Rita was grieving, not just the relationship, but the dream of the future she'd built in her head. She'd always imagined a big wedding, a loving husband, a home with warmth and laughter. Now she had to mourn the loss of something that had never truly existed. I watched her shift from anger to sorrow to calm acceptance. There were nights she cried into her pillow, and I held her hand without saying a word. There were mornings she got up, made herself breakfast, and reminded herself that this, too, would pass. Bilal, to no one's surprise, tried to get back in touch. He messaged, he called, he even sent flowers and handwritten notes, each one more desperate than the last. "Please talk to me, you misunderstood. It wasn't what it looked like. You were the only one I ever loved." His messages became so frequent that Rita had to block him. But the final straw came when he showed up at her doorstep one night, unannounced and uninvited. I was there. I had come by to drop off groceries, and we were sipping tea when the doorbell rang. Rita stiffened when she saw his face through the peephole. I stood beside her as she opened the door, calm but firm. "What are you doing here, Bilal?" she asked coldly. He looked disheveled, like he hadn't slept in days. "Please, Rita, just give me 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking." She crossed her arms. 5 minutes to do what? Lie again? Pretend you didn't sneak off with your ex days after proposing to me? "No," he said, voice cracking. "I messed up, I did, but it didn't mean anything. I panicked. I got cold feet, and she was just familiar, but it was a mistake." Rita didn't flinch. "You didn't make a mistake, you made a choice. A mistake is spilling coffee. What you did was deliberate. You gambled with my heart, and now you're here because you lost." He tried to say more, but she shook her head. "I don't want to hear it, and I don't owe you forgiveness just because you showed up sad." Then she closed the door, slowly, quietly, and never looked back. After that night, Bilal stopped trying. His silence was a relief, but it didn't erase the storm he had stirred. Rita was still dealing with relatives who were shocked, confused, or awkwardly trying to console her. Some even had the nerve to suggest she keep it private next time, as if her reaction, not Bill's betrayal, was the problem. But Rita stood her ground. She told them, "I didn't create the drama. I ended it." Meanwhile, something surprising began to happen. People started reaching out to her privately, women she barely knew, acquaintances from school, colleagues, saying they'd seen the video or heard the story and felt empowered. Some even confessed they had gone through similar betrayals, but never had the courage to act. Rita's inbox became a mix of support and shared pain. It lifted her in a way that no family member's reassurances could. She realized she hadn't just stood up for herself. She had stood up for all the women who had been told to be quiet, to tolerate, to forgive for the sake of saving face. One evening, over dinner, she said to me, "I think I want to speak up more, not just about Bill, but about women not settling. I feel like maybe I went through this for a reason." I nodded. "You found your voice. Maybe now you can help others find theirs." From that conversation bloomed something beautiful. Rita started a blog. At first, it was just an outlet, short reflections about love, expectations, red flags, and healing, but soon it picked up traction. Her posts went viral. She was invited on a local talk show to share her experience. Watching her speak so confidently on camera, I barely recognized the girl from a few weeks ago, the one who had nearly collapsed under the weight of betrayal. She was blooming, and in the midst of this personal revolution, something else happened. Rita was offered a job. One of the editors from the talk show had read her blog and reached out, saying, "You have a voice. We'd like you to write for us." It was a freelance position, but it was a start. Rita had always loved writing, but had never pursued it seriously, until now. Her pain had carved a new path forward, not the one she had expected, but one that felt more true. As for Sabine, well, rumors spread that her reputation took a hit after the incident. She posted cryptic stories about jealous women and private matters, but eventually went quiet online. Word was that her own circle had distanced themselves after learning the truth. Bill, too, faded into the background. Once a social butterfly, now barely a blip on anyone's radar. Life moved on, slowly, steadily. Months later, Rita was invited to another engagement party, this time for a close friend. She hesitated to attend but eventually decided to go, saying, "I'm not going to let one man steal my joy forever." She wore a navy blue dress, smiled genuinely, and danced without fear. People whispered, of course, they always do. But this time, the whispers were different. They were filled with admiration. I stood at the edge of the crowd, watching her laugh with friends, and I realized something. Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's in the decision to stay soft when the world tries to harden you. Sometimes it's just showing up, without shame, without bitterness, and choosing to begin again. Rita had done just that. In the months that followed, Rita's life took on a rhythm no one had expected, especially not her. What began as a moment of heartbreak at her own engagement spiraled into something larger, something more empowering. And though no one would ever wish for betrayal, it was undeniable that Bill's selfishness had inadvertently launched Rita into a chapter of self-discovery, growth, and courage she never thought she had in her. The wedding that never happened became a story many women whispered about in salons, office lunchrooms, and college dorms. But more than the scandal, people remembered Rita's strength. She didn't just walk away from a broken relationship. She stood in it, faced the wreckage, and rebuilt herself from its ashes. Every woman who'd ever felt silenced or second-guessed found a voice through hers. What impressed me the most was how she refused to let her past define her. It would have been easy to become bitter, to shrink away from the world, to distrust everyone who walked through her life, but Rita didn't take that route. She turned her pain into purpose. The blog she started became a full-fledged online platform, the Mirror Room, a space where women from all walks of life submitted stories of betrayal, recovery, empowerment, and healing. What began as a blog post about her own heartbreak soon blossomed into a movement. She was invited to host workshops. She wrote guest columns. She even gave a TD-style talk about boundaries and bravery. People no longer saw her as the girl who got cheated on. They saw her as a voice, a presence, a force, someone who taught that silence wasn't always noble, and that dignity wasn't the same as keeping things hidden for the sake of appearances. One evening, as we sat on the rooftop of our favorite cafe, watching the city light up below, I asked her if she ever regretted how it all played out. She smiled. I don't regret exposing him. I don't even regret loving him, because if I hadn't gone through that, I wouldn't know how strong I am. I wouldn't be here right now, knowing who I am and what I'm capable of. I nodded, admiring her resilience. She had turned one of the most painful moments of her life into the beginning of something remarkable. I couldn't help but think of all the people who had doubted her. The aunties who had once whispered behind her back now sent messages of support. The relatives who had once labeled her too soft now proudly claimed her strength as their family's pride. Even Bilal, I heard, had moved cities. Word had it he struggled to land a job for months, and the shadow of what happened lingered around him. Whether it was karma, consequence, or just life, I didn't know. But I did know this. Rita never once gloated. She didn't need to. Her life was the loudest answer. The final chapter of that engagement was never written in the way she once imagined it. There were no wedding bells, no honeymoon photos, no married bliss. But instead, she gained something else: clarity, peace, a future unchained from a man who didn't deserve her. And as she stood firm in her truth, surrounded by those who truly loved her, I realized that maybe life doesn't always go the way we plan. But sometimes when the wrong people walk away or are pushed out, the right version of ourselves has room to step in. Rita didn't get the fairy tale wedding she had planned, but she got something better. She got herself back.